What's going on, YouTube Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review slash knife overview to do with you guys. This is the hopefully much anticipated Protech Ferrum Forge Massdrop Mordax. I'm not sure which order to put all of that stuff in. I'll get it correct and put it in the title, but really excited to talk about this knife. As many of you know, this is the knife that I will be giving away to one lucky winner as soon as I hit 50 patrons. No, you don't have to be a patron to enter the contest, but basically whenever I hit 50, that's when I'm going to be giving it away. If you want details to that, you can follow the link in the description of this video. That'll take you to my Patreon, and there's bold text explaining exactly what's going on. So anyways, I'm sure you guys are also wondering, like, hey, what about those other two knives that you're going to give away that you talked about last week? I'm going to be drawing names for the Bestech Lion and for the FH41 on Friday of this week. So if you're just hearing about these two knives in the giveaway for the first time, make sure you go back to the video where I talked about these two knives. I think it's the reveal, the giveaway knives reveal, 3,000 subscriber giveaway knives revealed. Make sure you leave your comment under that video so that you can be entered. I will be drawing names this Friday. Please be at least 18 years of age and be able to provide me an address that is within the continental United States. It's okay if you live outside of the continental United States or if you live in another country. You can still enter, but I have to be able to ship to an address within the continental United States. So your friends, your family members, you know, anything like that. Anyways, let's go ahead and move on here. I realize, guys, I pointed this out yesterday. I'm going to be giving this knife away, so of course I'm going to be, I mean, you're probably thinking, of course he's going to say nice things about it. He's going to be giving it away. I am going to try and remain, you know, as honest as possible. I think everything that I'm going to say or want to say about this knife is going to come pretty organically. So let's go ahead and take a measurement of this knife here. Overall length on this guy, we're looking at 8 1/4 inches. Tip to scale, you're probably looking at about 3.6 inches. Blade length, you're looking at about 3 1/4 in terms of actual cutting edge. That has an amazing blade to handle ratio. Nice choil there. Very similar to ergonomically, or at least the visuals of ergonomics, very similar to an XM18, which I would use as an example here, but both of my XMs got sold. If you didn't hear about that, just watch yesterday's upload and I explain it all there. Let's go ahead and do some size comparisons here up against the Ontario Rat Model 1. Rat 1 coming in at 8.6 inches overall. How about up against the Spyderco PM2? PM2 coming in at 8.3 inches overall, very similar in size to the PM2. How about up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue? Ritter Hogue coming in at 8 inches overall, so just shy of the full length of the Massdrop Mordax here. And last but not least, the Spyderco Delica. Delica coming in at 7 inches overall. So you can see that this knife is absolutely a full-size knife. It's a sweet spot for me in that it is 8 1/4 inches overall. It means that I can get my hand all the way around it, whether I want to be back here or choked up in that forward choil position. Let's go ahead and weigh it. I'm going to do the smart thing and turn my scale on after it's already down. I have a lot of trouble with that. Give you an example of the action here. Great flipping action, and that is absolutely fall shut, pushing that button to release it. It does run on bearings, has an excellent, I would say medium, like exactly medium detent. The flipper tab is in exactly the right place in its relationship with the pivot and the weight of the blade to get it to deploy without fail every single time. So weight on this guy coming in at 3.77 ounces. That's going to make a lot of people happy. 3.77 ounces again. So really great weight. It meets that a lot of people's criteria, you know, for whether or not it's an EDCable knife. You know, it seems like the general rule is under 4 ounces, so it meets that for those of you who, you know, put a lot of stock in that. So let's go ahead and talk about the anatomy and materials of this knife. We have a beautiful and just like the most quintessential drop point blade that I've ever seen. I mean, you've got the flat that carries out about 75–80% the length of the blade. You have a little swedge up top. Blade stock thickness is nice and thin. In fact, I believe it's actually thinner. Yeah, it's even thinner than the Hogue Ritter here, which is about 125 thousandths. So you can imagine there how nice and thin that's going to come down behind the edge. Not the thinnest in the entire world, but definitely thin behind the edge. You have a nice, fine-grained stone washing on the blade here. Looks really nice. This is just a classy looking blade. I like how they do Protech on the front, Protech USA. Love their logo. I don't like all this mess on the back. I just 20 CV and then Massdrop and kind of scoot it over and make it smaller. That would have been fine. We don't need the model numbers and codes and whatever all that stuff is. I do like how Ferrum Forge puts their shield on the frame. I think that's really nice and really classy. That looks good. The blade is CPM 20 CV. Most of us know by now that that is the American version of M390 or Crucible's version of M390. So it's basically the same composition, also the same as CTS 204P, which is made by Carpenter. Moving down to the scales here, we didn't talk about the forward choil. You've got a generous forward choil. We'll talk about that in ergonomics. Moving down to the scales, we have gray 60, 61 T6 aluminum scales with some nice sort of, working finished or darker gray hardware there. You can see on the pivot, which is a nice size Torx head, and then back here the screw for the stop pin, the button, actually there's no screws on this side. The screws are actually on the other side, which is nice. I really like that. I really like this Type 3 hard coat anodizing that you see on aluminum. If you go and look at where this knife was originally available for purchase, which it's not anymore, I had to wait I think it was like 5 months for this knife. You'll see a discussion under there. This was a $200 knife, a lot of different variants. You get different colors. You get ones that have like milling. Nick Shabazz did a review on a blue one that had like all the crazy milling on the handle. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to get a plain one for myself, and it worked out really nice because originally I did not plan to give this knife away. This was going to be one for me because this kind of checked a lot of boxes for me. I like a plain monochromatic look. I like a straightforward working tool, and I am a big fan of fidget factor. So this had all of that stuff. Plus, it was a design that was based on one of Ferrum Forge's originally designed knives, the Mordax. And that was I think there are custom Mordaxes, but the mid-tech was one that I was after and just never got my hands on. I loved how the original Mordax looked. That was a titanium frame lock, and I think it was bigger. I want to say it was 8 3/4 inches overall, something like that. Big knife, but never got my hands on it, so this was, I was happy to jump at the opportunity for this. But anyways, you look at that conversation over there, you're going to hear people going, $200 and they did aluminum? Why didn't they do titanium? And I remember reading somebody said, aluminum is so much softer, and it's just like, it takes away from the hard use aspect of this knife, and, as soon as you put any pressure on it, that's nonsense. Think about all the knives that are built with the 6061 T6 aluminum. That have been proven to stand up to hard use. You've got a ton of Microtechs and Protechs in general that are geared directly towards military use or first responder use. I mean, how many times have you seen a picture on the internet of a premium knife that has 6061 T6 aluminum handles that's been absolutely thrashed and shredded to the point where the aluminum like bowed out? I'm sure there is an amount of force that you could apply to this where it would not be able to stand up to it. But in terms of whether or not this grade of aluminum is going to stand up to hard use, yeah, you're going to be just fine. There's nothing to worry about there. Would it have been nice if this was titanium? Well, sure, but it would have cost more money. This is a USA-produced Massdrop knife. Most of actually it's just called Drop now, but most of the knives coming out of Drop are made in China, or they're manufactured by Riyadh or WE or whoever. Or Bestech. No, this one's USA made. So 20 CV, the aluminum handles, the fit and finish on this, which we're going to talk about. I mean, honestly, I don't think $200 was really all that bad. I think maybe $180 would have been more so, more easy to swallow, I guess, for a lot of people. But I think it's just because the original Mordax was titanium, and a lot of people wanted to see the scales made out of titanium with the push button. Everybody seemed to really absolutely accept the push button thing with this, which I'm in agreement with. This is a plunge lock, push button lock, not an automatic knife. You basically just use the button to move that cylinder out of the way so that the blade can drop. And Drop does it. It is very smooth, very easy to get into a rhythm of flipping and then dropping the blade back into place, and you can do this forever. Let me tell you this. whoever ends up getting this knife, I mean, obviously I'm not going to carry or use it. It's going to remain in pristine condition, but I can guarantee it will be thoroughly broken in by the time you get it. This thing runs on bearings and it's very, very smooth, but it's getting smoother and smoother and smoother the more that I play with it. None of the hardware is backing out. It does lock up absolutely solid, up, down, left, or right, which it was something I was a little bit concerned with a plunge lock. I wasn't sure if that was going to be substantial enough to hold the blade in place. Yeah, it definitely looks that way. It also is one of those where over time, like a lot of locks, it actually should just continue to lock up harder and harder and harder. There's a cutout on the blade that makes room for that cylinder head. You can see it moving. It's right in here. So as that continues to wear in a little bit, you can see it's locking up really early there, but as it continues to lock up over time, it should only get more solid as long as whatever you decide to do with this is not like insane, you know. And I realize I'm being broad there, but basically if you're not using this thing like a mega pry bar or a hammer or something like that, or you're not trying to chop down trees with it, then the lock is going to be just fine. I trust it 100%. So I don't have an issue with the plunge lock. I don't have an issue with the scales. They do have that kind of chalky, smooth texturing that comes with hard coat anodized aluminum. And just keep this in mind, whether you're looking to win this one or you've got an opportunity to buy one on the secondary market, because again, I don't think you can buy these new right now, at least at the time of this recording. It's gonna show snail trails. This hard coat anodized aluminum. If you keep it in your pocket with other stuff, or you're using it, or you are left-handed and you're running it into your wedding ring all the time, like it's definitely going to scratch up. A lot of people talk about that in negative light. I actually like how snail trails look. Like if you look at pictures of like thoroughly used Sebenza 21s or any of those Chris Reeve knives that have that bead blast finish on titanium, it's very similar to how it looks over time as it wears. I actually think it looks really nice. It tends to wear around these edges here where the chamfering starts, and obviously on the body. And I honestly think it looks good, so I don't really have a problem with that. Some people don't like that, but I don't have a problem with it. As per usual with Protech knives, it just sort of comes to a seam. Now the way that they did this is pretty good. It doesn't look bad at all, and there's a nice place for your lanyard. I would honestly prefer that we have a backspacer situation, but I think in the construction of this knife, I think these scales sort of interlock together, or they lip over each other. I'm not 100% sure on that, but that might be why we see seams on the aluminum scales of Protech knives, or just automatic knives in general. That might be the case, but just aesthetically, I would have preferred a backspacer. This is okay, it doesn't bother me. Moving over to the other side, we have one of the most excellent pocket clips that has ever existed. This is a deep carry clip that has that slot that's very similar to a hinder. It has the dip that you see on a lot of Benchmade knives, and it makes it really easy to sort of lock in and pull out. You also have screws that are recessed, which means as you push this pocket clip over the seam of your pants, it's not going to get caught on the screws themselves, which is awesome. This thing carries perfectly. It's very, very low profile. I love it. We've already talked about how much I love the Ferrum Forge design. I also love the simplicity of the female side, or the non-show side of the pivot. Really nice. Unfortunately, these screws are, I believe, the little tiny size that nobody likes, and but they look deep enough there, deeper than the screws on the Delica here. So maybe there's less chance of messing up the tool or the screw. I don't know. But seeing as this is made by Protech, you do have Protech's warranty. This is a USA-made knife. I don't know who you would actually go through for the warranty. I would imagine it would be Protech, but I don't think you're going to have an issue with that at all. I really like how the screws are hidden on the front side. That means that the screws go all the way through into the aluminum on the other side. Some people might be worried about the durability of that, or whether or not the screw might stand a chance of stripping out if you take it apart. I don't know. I would say, as per usual, just be careful when you disassemble stuff, and ask yourself, do I really need to be disassembling this knife? The only circumstances where I could imagine you would want to disassemble something like this is if you have taken it out and used it for so long, and you've used it so thoroughly that you've got it so caked up that it just won't work anymore, and you have to take it apart to clean out the pivot. In that case, yeah, you got to worry about how you take it apart, whether or not that aluminum is going to strip out, which it probably won't, but it just requires you to exercise care when you're doing that. I also don't know how that affects the warranty, so make sure that you check with you know, the official information as far as Protech's warranty goes. Before you do that, don't say, you know, Metal Complex said I could take it apart, so I did. Yeah, don't do that, because I don't know. So all the way around, this is a very handsome design, the fit and finish is just excellent on it. By the way, centering came absolutely perfect. You can see the tip of that meets up with the seam, just spot on. Just spot on centering. That's awesome to see. I love that. No blade play, up, down, left, or right. I think we already covered that. The action on this guy is nothing short of superb. It is very fun to get that to deploy and then drop it and deploy and drop it. You'll be playing with this thing for hours. I love the shape of the flipper tab. If you keep anything else in the pocket that you keep this knife with, it's going to be, you know, banging into stuff. That's just going to be the way that it is. The way that it's shaped, though, is just it's just superb for actually flipping. It's basically a Hinder XM18 flipper tab that's been turned upside down. You can see the curvature rather than curving down like an XM18. It actually curves this way, which kind of puts your finger in a position where, you know, if you're not in exactly the right spot, you might run it up on the blade, but it's very comfortable. You know, if you kind of imagine this as a trigger you're kind of pulling back on, you're good. Ergonomically, right there in that forward position with the choil, it's fantastic. Back here in this position, in my experience, there is no hot spot with the pocket clip. It's just excellent. It's very smooth all the way around, easy to hold on to. You don't need texturing on the aluminum because of the ergonomics and the position for your fingers on this knife. It's just perfect. I would have liked to have a little bit of jimping up here. It doesn't need to be down here because then that would create a situation where you're running your finger into it every time you flip it. But I mean, this is the type of knife that I would take out and use outside. I mean, yeah, it's on bearings, but do I think it would serve well for that purpose? Yeah, absolutely. This knife it's beautiful, it's elegant, it's straightforward, but it's absolutely a cutting tool. It's an efficient one at that. A lot of times there's a direct correspondence between, in my experience, the simplicity of something like this and how good of a tool it is. It's very simple, it's very easy to manipulate. You know, while it is fun and it's kind of fidgety, it also makes sense that something would be, you know, able to be deployed and then put back disengaged like this, you know. Imagine pulling this knife out of your pocket, being able to flip it and then use it and then just push a button. It falls back into place and you're ready to put it back in your pocket. I love that. It's very, very utilitarian. And that's part of the reason why I'm so excited to give this knife away, because I'm honestly, I truly do feel that this is an excellent knife. And I you know, as much as I want to keep it, you know, I originally bought it for myself. It's a lot more meaningful to give away a knife that I can say was supposed to be for me and that I absolutely do recommend. I mean, spoiler, I'm definitely going to recommend this knife. This knife ticks so many boxes in terms of, you know, it's a full-size, you know, knife that is absolutely going to be at home with outdoor tasks and some of your harder stuff. I mean, obviously this isn't a pry bar or a hammer, but yeah, you know, if you work on a construction site, you work outside, you're going to go camping or hiking or whatever. Yeah, this is a knife that's going to be good for that. It's also, honestly, it's going to be a great EDC knife even if you don't do stuff like that. The look of this knife is simple, and while it is large, it has a pretty small and very simple carry profile, and it looks just classy enough that I think you could get away with carrying it if it's legal and if your workplace accepts this. You could carry it in an office setting. You know, it's going to do okay in khakis given the fact that it only weighs 3.75 ounces. And it also is kind of a gentlemanly looking folder. I mean, this is a knife that I would carry to church or to a nice social event, you know. It's awesome that it kind of fits all of those different roles. And that's, you know, it's because of the simplistic look. The blade is ground in a way that's going to be excellent for a multitude of different cutting tasks. It's nice and thin. There's nothing in the cutting path. You can choke up on it. I mean, and it's a drop point blade with some nice belly, you know, and you've also got a nice tip on there too. And the tip remains fairly robust all the way down to the end, thanks to the flat that runs out about 80% the length of the blade. This is just excellent. I mean, seriously, the only two things that I can say about this, well, there's three things. They use the little tiny Torx heads, whatever. They're deep enough that you can get your tool in there. I wish there was some jimping on the back of the blade, but there's not. And ergonomically, there's enough curvature in the handle and shape to keep your hands locked in. And I would have preferred a backspacer, but there's not one, and the design is completely fine. Honestly, I think this is one of the very best, you know, EDC knife designs that I've ever seen. I think this knife is absolutely excellent. I wish that they were more readily available. I think they said like only 300 or something of them were sold. So if this is going to be the only run of them, it means they're going to be, after a while, they're going to be pretty scarce even on the secondary market. I have a feeling that people are going to overcharge for these on the secondary market. I don't think $200 was a bad price. I would have liked to have seen it about $180. If you start seeing these things for, you know, I don't know, if you see them for $220, I guess, on the secondary market, I wouldn't say that's the worst thing in the world, given that you can't get them unless Massdrop decides, or Drop and Protech and Ferrum Forge decide to do another run. You know, I don't know. I mean, it depends on how badly you want it. But if you start seeing them for $250 or $300, I mean, hopefully we don't see that. But if you do, no, I don't think so. I don't know that it's not something that I would recommend people do that on. But the knife itself and what it was originally priced at, I can absolutely recommend it. This is one of my favorite knives of all time that I've ever handled as well. So not only will it go on my playlist of my most recommended knives, it's also going to go on that playlist of knives that just bring me absolute joy. This is excellent, and the person, whoever ends up winning this, is just going to be infinitely happy with it. I mean, it's just amazing. It's so simple, and I find a lot of beauty in that, and I find a lot of enjoyment out of that. You know, it's something that I think will appeal to a lot of people. So anyways, guys, honestly, that's all that I can say about this knife. Big fan of Ferrum Forge, big fan of Protech, big fan of what Massdrop has been doing. So as far as I'm concerned, this was an obvious home run. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you'd like to take a look at my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like. So check that stuff out. And if you enjoy all my content, then please subscribe to my channel because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.